joining us today. I appreciate that you taking the time to join us today and talking about this important topic of future of communication. And can you imagine a time in the last 50 years that have been more exciting than the time that we see coming up to creating and experiencing in the next 5 years? In fact, Rene Gabriel in his book, The Spatial Web, on how the Web 3.0 will connect humans, machines, and AI to transform the world. It's the emergence of smart cities and factories, autonomous cars, homes, smart appliances, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, animated shopping, and digitized personal assistants. Really transforming the way that we work, live, play, travel, and shop. And all across the planet, the technologies are breaking out from behind the screen and certainly into the physical world around us. Simultaneously, people, places, and things in our world are being digitized and brought into the virtual world, becoming part of the digital domain. So we're actually digitizing the physical and physicalizing the digital. Digitizing the physical and physicalizing the digital. I always get that mixed up. But the clear boundaries are starting to blur between real and the virtual worlds. Our near-term future has got all the indicators that the science fiction movies are really starting to come true and happening in our short-term future ahead of us here. In fact, Benjamin J. Butler said that we're facing revolutionary times, but it's an opportunity for evolution. He sees the future, in the future of this, return to storytelling, self-expression, and a greater form of dialogue. Also, he says that today, the future depends upon communication. And it's at a time when we have an unprecedented access to communication technology, but we're also facing a massive breakdown in human connection and human communication. So all the more importance that the future depends upon communication. And James reinforced that people are connecting in more ways and new ways than ever before. Businesses that embrace the change, accept the dynamics, are the ones who are going to be forward-thinking. They need to act fast, and they might win in this new world. And Erica is also talking about embracing technology and ideas and digital ideas into large organizations, that you have to be the advocate for the consumer. And this is critical because this is becoming a consumer-led world. And her advice to any organization trying to get on the digital fast track is definitely to use data and make sure you look at data to help set up your value proposition, because the data will help to prove your point and your case to management or shareholders or whoever you're trying to convince behind that. So she also said, be big, be bold, and be brave. And Craig and Paolo, well, they've talking about a lot of interesting intelligent machines connecting with humans, and Moxie is my favorite. I want one of those, by the way. But we're moving through a time where technology, we're living with brands all around us, characters all around us. And it's important to know how do brands connect with those voices. How are we able to build a brand voice that shares our customer journey using human emotion to engage with the customer? And of course, it's about human emotion, and Elizabeth helped us bring it all back to a simple equation, that it's humanity and technology, how do they fit together? As a matter of fact, she was talking about it's more, people are looking right now for less inspirational leadership and much more empathetic leadership. They want to see things from their point of view. Customers want to take it from their perspective, not from other people's part of this. And this is what has to be at the heart of successful communication in any company. With that, I would like to welcome all the panelists for some rapid fire questions. We're going to get going. Panelists, welcome. Wonderful. I'm going to start off with you, Paolo. You were the first that popped up on my screen. I'm going to do some rapid fire quick questions here. Paolo, one word to describe your personality.
Furious.
Oh, you created a word. I love that. Okay, the opposite of that, Craig, you're over at Embodied with them. What's your one word for your personality?
Mine would have to be playful.
So excited. I have no idea the human world.
I hear Moxie's excited. Very nice. Elizabeth.
Energetic.
Energetic. Erica.
I'm going to take two. Always curious.
Okay, and if you picked one, which one's how are you going to mix those two?
I'm just going to put it together as one word, as always curious, if we can make up words.
I love it. No problem. Benjamin.
Well, probably imaginative, if not out of the box or even subversive.
Well, those are a couple words. I'd like to see how you're going to put all of them together. So as we get into this, as technology becomes faster, smarter, better than humanity perhaps, what's going to drive the future? Is it technology or humanity? Pick one. Paolo.
I think the synergy between the two is what's going to drive the future.
Synergy. Benjamin.
Well, I'm reminded of Marshall McLuhan's phrase, we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us. So I think it's co-creative.
Okay, see, this is what happens with futurists, right? You know, they're not going to give you a simple answer. You have to really think about this answer. I like it. Craig.
You know, I think, again, it's a collaboration, right? Like we are making and unmaking ourselves with our tools and our technology. So, you know, who says who takes the lead in a dance, right? It's going to be a flow state, and ultimately we will probably evolve through the dialogue and the process.
Okay, in a dance, who leads? Somebody's got to lead in a proper dance. So is it technology or is it humanity?
I think increasingly it'll be technology.
Yes.
If we're not very careful.
I got him to say one side. Perfect. Erica.
I think it's technology.
Ooh. And Elizabeth?
I think it's a false distinction because we create the technology. It's what makes us human. But the very first thing a baby will reach for is its rattle. And so we need tools, we need technology to make us who we are. So I'm going to say humanity.
Well, it's interesting. We have a combination. I'm going to vote for technology, but my heart's humanity. So let's jump into this around humanity. We're going to kind of kick this off. Benjamin, you talked about the dilemma that machine learning might be overshadowing human connections and emotional bonding. Is this true, or are we on a path towards this?
I think it's really early days actually to tell with some of these technologies, particularly the internet. Although one might say we're 20 years in, with machine learning specifically, we're very early on. But I think you know, bots and advanced AI is going to give us more time and freedom to become human, to live into our potential.
Living to that potential, and how do you connect with the technology in order to do that?
Oh, me again?
Yeah, I'm coming back to you.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's how we, you know, it's the mindset in which we engage with our technologies is the key. The technology is the medium, but you know, how do we use it? It's like a fire. We can burn ourselves on fire, or we can use it for good means.
Well, it's interesting because that leads into, you know, Craig, you talked a lot previously about the natural human interaction that we need to engage with technology. How are companies going to be able to develop this new way of engaging with the consumer, you know, where you have to bring the human emotion into the equation to connect with them?
Well, I think in the early days, it's going to be very expensive, and it creates an opportunity for brands and companies to lead the market by moving where other people either can't see the end goal or won't support the investment required to reach it. So, you know, my background's at the Walt Disney Company, and I love the story of Walt Disney. As a creator, he would invest in his next dream himself. And the company was a means to create that. So when he wanted to do a full-length feature film, people said, Walt, you're crazy. No one will sit in a theater watching a cartoon for an hour and a half. And he won Academy Awards, and he proved that if you have great content, it doesn't matter really the format. Or Disneyland, where people said, well, there's fairgrounds and carnivals, no one's going to pay to go to your theme park. And he invested his own money and reaped the benefits of that. I think the same is true with this next frontier of digital companions and virtual characters. Initially, there'll be a huge investment required because you're going to have to think about the psychology of behavior, of animation, of humanity, of like the things that make content compelling and a point of view compelling. And then over time, as AI continues to march forward and our tools get better, it'll be like website development. What started as an intense project that was only for technologists is now something that Wix does with AI and allows people to pump out websites by focusing more on the creative impact than the technology required to do so. But I think it's a phased thing, and we're at the start of, I think, an opportunity like pioneers, right, to take the land and develop it, if you're willing to make that investment.
And but from a business perspective, it's a little tough to find that side of the equation, isn't it? Yes, we've got Wix, we've got these great tools that allow us to do this, but from the human side, how do we start from a business angle to start to rally this around to even be able to interface and connect with it, with these new technologies?
I think you're already seeing the seeds of that in the trending data that's coming out, particularly with what we're going through with a global pandemic. Particularly younger generations that are very idealistic, they're rallying around brands that they see as being authentic, as connecting to social purpose or social impact. You're seeing corporations have to really consider like what is their brand identity, not just in a geography or a region, but really globally, because there aren't these territorial boundaries that are confining the messaging. So I think one of the big transformations that we're going through as a global community is rewriting the rules around, well, what is a good human? What is a good brand? What is a good corporation? What is a good partnership between work and life, between working at home and your home is where you work? We're in a time where like the worlds are in collision. And what comes out of this period, I think, are strong brands that really care about people, that care about how do we help people become better people, and everything flows from that, whether that's the soap I use because it's not environmentally damaging and it's good for my skin and it's healthy and it's a good messaging, both the one that I want to embrace as well as one that's good for the planet, to media, right?
Well, okay, I'm not going to talk about your soapy suds, but it's a nice transition back to Erica. In her session earlier today, she was talking about the importance in being able to move from inspiration to empathetic leadership. And Elizabeth, it'd be great to, can you tell us a little bit more about specifically how this may apply to other business? I know this is your primary Facebook culture that you really use as your driving force forward, and building these groups, over 100,000 groups, I believe it was. So how important is this for business to be successful?
Yeah, very. And whilst, I work for Facebook, this is a conversation that I've had with a whole bunch of our clients and across industries throughout the last 3 months in particular. And it's really resonating with people come what may in terms of their industry or even their role. And I think the leadership opportunity, whether you're a designer, whether you're a CEO or a CMO, is to come down from the stage and stop thinking about inspiration as something that you're doing to other people, and sit with people and understand what it is that they need more, and get that human need and that human connection in the heart of your work. And one of the things I think that this year has taught us, Darren, and this year has to have some good in it, like I'm determined, is that listening is a leadership skill. And if I think about, the people I've supported and worked with, in and outside the company over the years, actually the people who are very best at their job, no matter what it is that they do, they're really good at listening. And if you heard what Erica was saying earlier, Erica was essentially saying she's really nosy as a person. No offense, Erica. And actually that nosiness and that sense of inquisition is at the heart of listening and is at the heart of deeply understanding others and valuing their perspective. And that, I think, is the gift of this terrible year that we're all going through, is that depth of realization that that's a core leadership skill, whatever the job you're doing.
So there's a question that's just kind of come in from earlier from two questions kind of quickly on this subject that as we talk about it. In working in this new remote space now, how do you deal with being able to not coach them face to face, bringing their, still their performance is still maintaining? What are the tips and tricks about actually making this work successfully?
Yeah, I had a really funny conversation with somebody at one of our industry groups the other day, and he was saying, help me work through how I have this conversation with somebody to give some performance coaching, because he sat in his living room. We would normally do this in the office. I'm like, yeah, but when he goes home, your voice is always been in his head, and he's always gone home to his living room. So you should act as if you're in his living room anyway, because he's inviting you into his space, right? And sort of having that. What I've tried to do for myself and for leaders is to move beyond what can be quite clunky ways of thinking about people. So I think we've moved on our appreciation of the inclusion agenda massively this year, Darren. So typically we might have used things like gender, ethnic background, sexual orientation, those things, right, to describe people and to think about how we're engaging with someone in conversation. I was quite embarrassed to say that as a member of my team, I've been with my team for 2.5 years. I've known them better in the last 4 months than I had done over the past 2.5 years, because I now know who's the primary breadwinner, what their financial responsibilities are, what their health status is, who they're caring for outside of the household, if somebody's vulnerable within the household. And actually those things, we haven't put a label on them before, but they're really, really important in terms of how you go about living your day-to-day life and the decisions you make. So again, any conversation, performance conversations, coaching, whether it starts with that empathy and understanding that you're in someone's living room the whole time, whatever the room you're sat in, and to listen and to connect and to start with where they're at before you go with your agenda.
Interesting. I'm a critical point. I think that it's shaken us all up, and to really bring the human touch back to the core part of business. Erica, leading into that as well, you with One Championship, and as you were talking about such a young company building within that type of culture as well. How do you see this in a new type of company and building around this human touch, and also I think we're talking technology, we're talking human empathy and the other ones, but for your business it's also about creativity and it's, how do we weave all of these together, because I think creativity is also a word that we don't hear very often.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it really matters whether you're a startup or a legacy business or any type of business. Good leadership is where it all comes down to. And, Lizzie just talked about listening and empathy. You need that no matter what type of company you're in. I think the difference is in the agility. As I've worked for big companies like Nike and Adidas and Ralph Lauren and Tiffany, big companies with long history and heritage. Whereas at One Championship, we are a 9-year-old company. We are very agile. We can pivot our business from one content stack to another very, very quickly. I mean, we started as an MMA company and we added esports. It felt like almost overnight. And now that part of the business has, over the pandemic, really just exploded. But that agility and ability to adapt and pivot. I hate the word pivot because seems like we're overusing it today, but I think it's a really important word because in a lot of company cultures, things have always been done a certain way, and so they continue to be done that way. I think now in the pandemic, but also that startup culture, being able to be agile, to pivot, to rethink things, to not just do things because that's how we've always done it, but how should we be doing it and what's the best way to do it. I think that's the key difference.
So taking all of these elements in, Paolo, I want to throw this back to you and come back to the technology of this side of this argument, talking about that with more of these VR, augmented reality, 3D spatial web, are we starting to overwhelm human senses? Are we pushing our natural bodies to a overload system? Especially as you start getting more and more sophisticated with all of these systems, what does that look like to the human body and our makeup?
No, I think we already have seen a lot of that. The cognitive load of interacting with technology is very high, even for devices like smartphones for texting. We have seen headlines of stories about teenagers texting and driving and getting into an accident. So the cognitive load is certainly high. To date, we have tried to use contraptions to interact with machines because we haven't had better interfaces. But we are beginning to see a paradigm shift happening where we are beginning to see more of a social interface where we can use voice and eye contact and body language and all that. And as you know, at least 50%, if not 80% of communication is nonverbal. And we're trying to cram all of that into a keyboard or a mouse device, which is very limited in bandwidth. But with voice and body language and facial expression and even the intonation of your voice conveys so much more information. And we are beginning to see a new face or new interface, if you will, to machines that's going to enable us to do a lot more without the cognitive load, because we have evolved into using all these senses that are, by the way, orders of magnitude more complex than texting, but we have just evolved. Parts of our brains are dedicated to being able to be social and social interaction. So that's going to open up new opportunities. On one hand, to democratize technology so that, for instance, my grandparents or elderly people that may not be able to learn new interfaces that are changing every day on the iPhone or the Android, but can talk to a device and get their job done. And on the other hand, it's opening up opportunities to quantify every micro interaction, not only in terms of the content of the interaction, but the sentiment of the interaction, I think, becomes very valuable. And I think for brands particularly, being able to quantify and understand if you're authentically delivering the experience you want the end user provides a feedback loop that you can keep optimizing over short time or the long run.
But isn't this, that's a lot to take in. It's overwhelming just listening to it for 3 minutes, let alone trying to figure out how you're working to build this. I mean, we have a hard enough time just being able to come up with text, images, graphics. But now you're asking me to understand the emotional contact, my voice. Am I angry? Am I happy? Am I that? How are brand, as we move into this space, how does a brand look at kind of figuring out that perspective as well and connecting with that emotional engagement into it across all the touch points, right? Now they're going to have to start bringing that across many touch points, and what does that look like?
It's a good question. I mean, from a technical perspective, obviously, if we do our job right, it should be seamlessly magical. You should get all of this data. Obviously, dicing and slicing through the data is going to be the job of your data analyst and business analyst to understand how do I extract what I want from this, but you'll get much richer understanding of, I don't know why Siri is talking to me, by the way, and transcribing me right now. That's failure of technology. But speaking of technology, trust us, it will all be good. But yeah, so I think if the technology works, and it will take years or decades to get there, but we are seeing the beginnings of it, right? I mean, if you look at the adoption rate of Alexa-like devices in the home, it's faster than the adoption of smartphones, which is faster than the laptop, right? Faster than the early computer. So we are removing these barriers which democratize technology, but also it gives us the other side, which is we can get much more insights into the user experience.
And Darren, I think just to tag on to what Paolo's saying, to call back to what Benjamin was saying about storytelling coming back into technology, I think that it's a great opportunity to, again, kind of reignite storytelling in a renewed format, right? Instead of being limited with just words and pictures and sentences and posters, being able to step into a story and do story dwelling, be able to step into a brand experience and not just go to an activation, but be able to experience that in your home, but feel connected with a personal experience. It comes back to what's the emotional connection, what's the heart, what's the human expression, and it's just new tools that you get to work with.
Well, there was a story, you talk about story. It was interesting why you guys also, Paolo started the company as well, talking about the Pixar light. He remembered looking at that character of the Pixar light, and that kind of changed his whole impression. Maybe quick answer on Paolo back to that. What was that inspiration that drove you coming from iRobot, from a technology background, to say, no, I need to create characters, and we need it, like Moxie, the birth of Moxie was really from that inspiration of that character.
It was very early in my life that sparked the imagination in me to actually change my whole career plans. Because I'm an immigrant, my parents had told me I'm going to be a doctor, so I was going to be a doctor. But then one day I saw a documentary on this company called Pixar when I was in my early teens, and I saw this first animated short, Loxa Jr., the two lamps, Mama Lamp and Baby Lamp, playing with a ball. And I was just blown away by how can you get pixels to do that with a computer. And that just set the direction of my life to follow my curiosity, as Erica was saying. I feel myself also, I've been always following my curiosity, to go pursue becoming a computer scientist, getting a degree in PhD, and eventually going and learning entrepreneurship. It eventually led me to robotic floor care because that's where the technology was, and it wasn't the sexiest job you could do. So I decided to leave iRobot about 5 years ago and go pursue the dream of having these lifelike characters brought to life that can have an impact and touch people at a very emotional level, and that can be beneficial in many mental health applications, which is what we are pursuing, but also beyond that, way beyond that. So bringing Toy Story to life, basically.
Well, Benjamin, it's important to have these characters and brand voices connected to this. And you talked about the spatial web and this 3D internet-connected world, connecting virtual worlds as we move into this. And the 3D internet, as you're saying, is an interesting space for this. How are we taking this, and what are the opportunities for companies that are engaging in this space? Kind of understanding, starting to take this different technology and moving it into the 3D internet.
Well, listening to Paolo and Craig just reminds me of really the importance of stepping back and using the imagination. You said earlier, I think the word you don't hear the word creativity so much, but the word you see even less, probably about 10 times less according to Google search when I last looked, was the word imagination. So I think it's really important at this time of human history to just step back and realize the significance of where we are, so it's actually really good to look at science fiction, look at I think we know this intuitively, that we're living at this really important time. That's why big history books are really important and have become bestsellers, from Sapiens and etc. And Big Future, of course. I'm trying to write one of my own at the moment. And you reference the spatial web in your opening remarks. Dan and Gabe at Versus.io are friends of mine, and that's a great book for getting an overview, and it's because you're seeing like the convergence of, actually I've lost count of how many technologies, 5 to 10 key technologies, from robots, AI, XR, which is VR and AR, 5G, edge computing. I mean, everything's coming together. It's actually, if you read The Future is Faster Than You Think, I think, by Peter Diamandis, he explains the importance of convergence, why certain breakthrough paradigm shifts require a number of technologies to come along at the same time. You know, like the flying car. Peter Thiel was always lamenting. They promised us flying cars, and we only got 130 characters. But you know, the flying car actually is quite realistic this decade. And the spatial web is a massive paradigm shift. I can't really overemphasize that. I would go as far as saying, and some people might roll their eyes, that it's as significant as the breakthrough in writing itself, because we're shifting back to my friend Sherry Herndon. I was talking to very recently. She worked with the late futurist Barbara Marx Hubbard, but she described this as the age of embodiment, which I think will suit Craig and Paolo, because and listening to you guys speak, you know, it just reminds me we've just focused on text for so long. No wonder we're always in our heads and bumping into things. We're going to be in our bodies more going forwards. I think we have to realize the significance of this.
Craig, I was just going to come back to you. I was just going to come back to you on that as well. But go ahead and finish your thought on that.
No, I just love this interesting progression from, you think about like the earliest human expression to try to tell people like where to go, where the water is, where the food is, what is the story of who we are. And you have these cave paintings from thousands of years ago. And then we abstracted and we did the Gutenberg Bible, and we abstracted and we started to have recording media and video media. And now, in a sense, we're collapsing back down to that interpersonal human-to-human connection. Technology is allowing distance to go away and time to go away because we have holograms and we have virtual presence. But increasingly, we're kind of on the back side of simplification of dialogue to emoticons, right, which are like cave paintings, into what we're doing now, which is starting to collapse time and space. So in some ways, we're just kind of completing a circle, a journey.
And obviously with Moxie and creating that type of a personality and character for specifically targeted towards young kids, and then ultimately I believe your next market is for the older adults. It's about creating personalities, right? And their own built-in personality. And it's interesting to me. It's funny when I was just listening to the interactions with Moxie, the kind of the flippant side of Moxie, you know, whatever that else. And where does that come into for companies actually, even building chatbots and building the interfaces that are authentic to their brand voice? What does this look like? Am I going to have in the personalization now, am I going to have 20 different brand voices to connect over chatbots, over VR, over holograms? You know, how am I going to use that from a business perspective, and what does that look like?
I think like business today, it just kind of depends on the size of your budget and how wide a net you want to cast, right? Like the more narrow you cast the personality and the character, it could still break out wide, but you might not have to serve everything to everyone. Or maybe you're a global brand and you have enough resources where that's really important and you want to make that personal connection in every kind of lifestyle, in every kind of demographic. I think it's really just that's kind of more of a question of scale and brand impact. And it's not to say that you can't start small and grow or start big and go smaller. But yeah, I think that it all comes back to how are you connecting with your audience? Are you authentic? Are you staying in the lifestyle and personality that people connect with? And already we're starting to see some examples of virtual hosts, like the virtual KFC character has 1.3 million followers, right? Or a character out of Japan where they were a virtual character, they changed the voice artist and then lost a lot of momentum around the character branding. So there's these new things that will start to come into play around the brand. Are you a wholly computer-generated brand with algorithms and automated speech and text and doing kind of metrics of emotion, or are you retaining kind of the human handcrafted elements? There'll be just new conversations.
So taking that one step further, Erica, as you're saying, you were born in one championship, born in the digital era, I believe that was, and with this change in characters and finding your authentic voice and working now in this whole new space, are you seeing that you're creating a different voice for different audiences? How do you look at connecting with these new characters, new digital voices from the brands?
I think for us specifically, it's a little bit different because we're we're a sports media company. So consumers come to us because they're interested in the characters who are the athletes. And the athletes are real people in real competitions, and you don't know what the outcome of the event is going to be unless you watch it. So I think that's slightly different. But if I put on, one of my other brand hats from, previously in my career, I think all of them have been superior marketing companies, and all of them we would have gone back to the consumer and back to what's the consumer insight. It's still marketing, and it's still understanding what are the consumer groups and what's going to motivate those different consumer groups. Can it be the same character voice? Does it need to be different for different groups? I mean, I really think that it truly is marketing 101 still. The character may be a different outcome, but how you get to that result is still going back to the consumer, using the data, figuring out the consumer insight, and what's the best way to reach and talk to that consumer. So I don't think the challenge is any different than it was back in the days of print and television. It's just the tools and the technologies have changed to give you so many different routes to reach that end consumer. But the messaging and the how, the what, the why is still what any marketer needs to go back to.
But don't you think that that's also more complex and challenging, because as we have all these different routes that we're taking, you'd mentioned as an example even key influencers. They're taking it into their homes, they're taking it into their lives. This starts to become a very dangerous slope that you're going to say, okay, from my brand perspective, this might cross this way or this way, and now that and people want real time, real engagement. So how do you kind of manage that from a brand perspective? Because things can go wildly wrong very quickly, as we've seen. One simple posting can all of a sudden cost you millions or billions of dollars.
But they could have gone wildly wrong before, and it's just again, I think crisis management and all of those things have changed, and you need to be agile, quick. You need to be not afraid to have a dialogue with your consumers, and certain industries have been slower to adopt that than others. But I think ultimately the challenges are still the same. You ultimately need to go back to your consumer insights. How do you talk to them? When do you talk to them? And that's the skill of marketing. So I think marketing has to adapt. But I think ultimately the principles are still the same.
And okay, then Elizabeth, be interested to come back to you on this point as well, talking about how complex and how quickly. I think you had a methodology is move fast. What was it? Move fast and break things was kind of a motto at Facebook that you had talked about a little bit. About that, and everything's changing so rapidly in this business world. How do you manage that rapid rate of transformation and move fast, quick break? And how do the businesses are looking at this? How do you build it into your operational flows?
Yeah, and look, as we've grown, we've evolved. So we used to have move fast and break things, and we've moved now to move fast because we appreciate the sense of responsibility we have when you've got 3 billion people relying on your services every month, right? And so I think that's a good example of needing to move needing to move and evolve and change. And honestly, in this environment, one of the things that I've been working with our people on is moving slowly, and that's appropriate in a health pandemic, to not move quickly, to hold back and to wait and see all the data and not necessarily be the first to do this or the first to do that. And our CEO and founder is very heavily engaged in healthcare. He runs with his wife, the Chan Zuckerberg Institute, and so that's a very important part of his passion and interest. And that's a very different metabolic rate to what has been typical at Facebook. And so that's been a real shift for us. But one of the things I would say that we do in normal times or outside of a healthcare pandemic, and that we've continued to do, is to hold the tension between knowing and learning. And that's something that I really appreciate about the company, is to bring multiple voices around the table and to gun for effectiveness over efficiency. Often we'll have 15 people in a room, chat, go, hack, get all the ideas out. In a different environment, you might have stage-gated ideas, right? You go from one committee to another committee, to another committee. What you lose there is you lose boldness, and you lose speed. But also, I think you lose the essence of, a brilliant idea, because you become more risk averse as you go up the chain, with committee after committee. So I think we take a trade-off on effectiveness versus efficiency, and we go for effectiveness and pull everyone around the table together in order to move quickly. I just appreciate it, and it's nothing you would ever write down, nothing you would ever design on a process map. It makes no sense. We're a spaghetti, but it does enable multiple points of view, and that's something, as I've gone on in my career, that I've appreciated more and more and more, is that diversity of perspective.
Okay, and with that, as we move into talking about the future of communication in this last few minutes here, Paolo, with Moxie as an example, we had a question basically asking from the audience, going, with a character like Moxie, how do you follow along with this? So if we're looking at creating a character that's interacting with kids or companies or whatever that is, where do you have to grow with that, and how important is that to the equation, so that you're connecting along the way and understanding that and making a difference in the future from this choice, because you already learned that 6 months ago?
Very good question. Obviously, these systems are super complex, and to your previous question, how do you use these tools, complex tools, and how does that shape the way we create experiences or manifestations of brands? And by the way, so one of the things we know, you know better than I, characters and storytelling are super powerful in building memorable brands. Why we have so many brands that have characters or mascots representing them. The ones that come to mind are like Jake from State Farm, or Flo from Progressive, or Gecko for Geico, and so on. So that is the power of having these characters that can provide improvisational, semi-fiction experiences in real-time interaction with the user, meaning that if we can encode the core brand values and represent your brand as an ambassador with the values you want, in a persona you want, you can build that. And with the latest and greatest of technologies, by the way, maybe a credit to Facebook with the GPT-3 technology, which is a generative natural language processing system that has ingested a huge amount of material from Wikipedia to books and so on, and can basically have a conversation with you about pretty much any topic You can base this kind of systems on top of that can have interaction with you, but you want to put some guardrails around it. And there are some tools where you can build a persona so the character doesn't change its persona, and also stays within guardrails of what you would do if you were there in that particular situation. If you had your own ambassador there representing you, for it to follow some guidelines and rules so that the digital character doesn't do things you would not have done or which are not representing your brand. So there are tools for doing that, and a lot of these tools also have a lot of memory. By the way, an area where machines are way many years ago advanced beyond us is memory. Machines do not forget. So if you want to have a continuation of relationship and experience over a long period of time, you can leverage those technologies to be able to do that. I don't know if that answers the question, because it's a very complex topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just extend that question. And Craig, I mean, part of it is just, as I'm learning with that person now, let's say I'm the child that's with this, and the question was really about who's man. You know, if you and me are friends, we're talking right here and now. We're making our own decisions about that. And the other point behind that is if you're building rules around how to develop a child or work in with an elderly, you know, they've already been already situated. So how do we build the rules to allow a personal choice, allow a personal growth as part of that?
Well, I think that one of the things that we're trying to do with the Moxie project, and something that I'm very excited about what we're trying to do with motivating human development through the system that we're building, is to take a look at the technology approach that we've used has really been about hyper efficiency and transaction. So in that sprint, to be able to let people connect, let people share, let people find what they're looking for on demand, in a lot of ways we've narrowed people's focus and created echo chambers that help people to find what they're looking for, but only what they're looking for. We've narrow casted them in. So if you think about a newspaper, it was a very inefficient delivery vehicle for information. So if I wanted the sports scores, I might have to work through 5 or 6 sections that had nothing to do with what I was looking for, but then find something that I felt was meaningful. So how do we create these messy interfaces that are more human-like? How do we bring in perspectives that aren't our perspective necessarily, but help to illuminate that diversity is really a strong value for ongoing success and evolution? So I think one of the big shifts that we're hoping with the characters that we're creating and the worlds that we'll build is we're not going to be prescriptive. We're not going to say to people, this is what you should know and here's what we're going to teach you. It's much more going back to like a Socratic tradition of, well, who are you and why are you? And why would you want to know that? And how would you find out whether that is valid or not valid? And what skills do you want to build? And what would you do when you've mastered them? What do you want to offer? In many ways, I feel like we're at this cusp of shifting gears in kind of our global society from, okay, so we can get all these things, but why do we need them? We can have all this information, but how do we apply it? I can have all these things in my life, but do I need them? And the sorting process, the discovery process, really comes back to those universal questions that we have to ask ourselves as humans. Why are we here? What is our purpose? What are we trying to accomplish? And I think if our next wave of technology supports humans in asking those questions and guides them, not directs them, but gives them a framework for finding more, then we truly start to build that utopian technology that knows what we need before we know it and gives us what support would be helpful right in the right time.
Okay, I'm buying. I'm drinking your Kool-Aid. Fine. But quickly to the panel, kind of just maybe some in the last 10 minutes. You know, it helped to shape some of your perspectives on what you think are important to specifically some small businesses as well. Not, you know, what we've been talking about is also large scale in a way, and how do we bring it back to smaller businesses, to individuals? What are some key tips that you suggest when in building this new using new technology for new ways to interact and engage with people. And I'm going to open it up random here. Let's just see, some top tips. Erica, you're already on.
Oh, sorry.
Elizabeth,
No, go. I was just going to say, just as a counter to the Kool-Aid, just a little one, is that yes, and who would have thought that summer 2020 people would be saying, "Oh, so desperate to get back into the office. I miss the office." The office has been a pejorative, a term. It's been a term of that people have used in their lives, right? They don't, people, used to say, "Oh, don't have on your tombstone, wish I spent more time in the office." And yet here we are with people saying, "Gee, I miss that water cooler. I miss that human connection and that physical act of being together." And so I just wanted to sprinkle just a little salt on what Craig was saying there, because that's been one of the curious things of this year. It's just, and people almost can't explain why. It's just, I just miss people, and just being together and hanging out together. So.
And I think that's an excellent point. And I'm actually personally more of an introvert, and I thought in the beginning of the pandemic I would be perfectly fine working from home, but I'm missing that connection obviously as well. And many studies have shown one thing that consistently shows happiness in life is how many connections you have in your social circle. And I think the way we think about it, at least from a technology standpoint, these technologies we are not really thinking about. They replace the need for human connection. We think they are more of a facilitator to human connection for people that do not have the opportunity or the skills for having human connection. So that's how we are using it. For Moxie in particular, this is for children who have social emotional challenges in connecting with other people. These are children that go and get therapy at $500 per session to be able to learn these skills, right? And for the elderly, as Darren indicated, elderly that are living independently or alone in home, that they are losing that social connection as well. And we have learned social isolation is the single most important factor in health deterioration, leading to many bad things. So I agree with you 100%. I agree. The Kool-Aid is not to say we want to create more separation between people. It's to facilitate that.
If I was to chime in, I mean, I've not really worked in an office for 9 years, but when I was in the corporate world, my most fascinating encounters were always the random ones by the coffee machine. In fact, I'd often just hang out there because that's where I catch people outside the normal paradigms when they're sort of in a more informal space. And I just want to pick up on what Craig said. I'm loving what you guys are both doing and what you're saying on this panel. The only thing I'd pick up on is the utopian technology. I would say, Craig, there's probably no such thing as a utopian technology, and you probably know this better than me. It really, when I thought about the history of communication, I had to keep coming back to the human connection, that it's not just transference of data. When the Spanish Armada arrived in England, they lit beacons all the way from Plymouth to London, and that's, strictly speaking, one might say that's communication, the transfer of data. But I think technologists and futurists, we have to remember it's that important combination of humanity and communication. And in my little keynote, I mentioned dialogue, which is a term often used by politicians when they don't want real dialogue. And Ted was great in reintroducing the art of storytelling, and I really think we need to bring back the art of dialogue. And leaders out there, please learn about the spatial web, learn about XR and all these amazing technologies, but also go out and hire great facilitators and learn, or weekends sit in circles with human beings This is why there's a lot of interest in indigenous peoples at the moment, actually. Sitting in circle. In many ways, we're going back to some of our primordial impulses, the storytelling, sitting in circle. Even this radical idea of being in our bodies, not in our minds all the time.
Well, I mean, I think that that's an important part is the physical, right? It's easy to sit in front of your screen all the time, interacting, engaging, or in virtual augmented reality worlds, but forcing the serendipity of going face to face and bumping into interactions and things and understanding, I think, is critical. From my perspective, it's pushing people back into the world more, using the technology to help them navigate that in an easier way. I'd rather spend less time figuring something out and more time interacting and experiencing myself. Erica, kind of last perspective from you on this.
On what?
I think in wrapping up, some of the advice you can give to the companies or people watching here that the takeaways of this in the future of communication and technology. What are those things that you've learned over the last even 6 months that you might push forward and offer?
Well, I mean, I kind of go back to, what Lizzie and I guess were both saying in the earlier sessions of, now's still a time to be bold, to be brave. But it's also a time, I think, to test and learn. I think we have the opportunity as leaders. Consumers are changing so fast. The research done at the beginning of the pandemic to research done in the middle and at the end, we're seeing huge shifts. And so I think now's a great opportunity as a marketer to test and learn, try some things, see if they work. I don't necessarily believe in fully sitting back and waiting and listening. I think brave brands are taking those steps, and not that brands who aren't brave, don't get me wrong, but trying things and using this as an opportunity to take a stand, be brave, test and learn, and keep listening to the consumer.
Okay, I'm going to go on back to that first word, technology, humanity, driving forward. What's your one piece of advice, everybody on the board, back towards technology, humanity? What's more important in the future of communication?
I think without humanity or focus on humanity, the technology is irrelevant.
Yeah, I would agree with Paolo. Ultimately, the technologies are fantastic, amazing, but humanity has to come first.
Yeah, I would say technology is moving fast, and we need to use our humanity to figure out how to stay on the train with technology, because that's not going to stop. It will leave us behind if we don't bring our humanity to it.
Yeah, empathy is queen from me.
Empathy is queen. So, in wrapping this, we're saying this is a critical element. What's one piece of advice that you can give people in the next 6 months to jump into personally from your experience? If there was nothing else they did in the next 3 months, what's that one quick advice? And let's start with Paolo.
I would say experimentation with both technologies and human dialogue. And when I say dialogue, I do mean online and offline dialogue, of course.
Okay. Paolo.
I would say dialogue. This is an opportunity where we are going back to bonding. That's maybe the silver lining, going back to some of our roots, some of the basic things. We are not busy running around flying to Hong Kong to be in this meeting or flying to another country to have another meeting. We have an opportunity to take a pause, reevaluate, introspect, and connect.
Craig.
I think from my standpoint, it's that we've come through an era of broadcasting and mass marketing. And the thing to think about is with 7 billion people on the planet and growing, it's okay to have small markets that are very fiercely loyal to your brand and your values. So authenticity, I think, is the key word.
And I think Erica, did we cover? Erica has that one thing that somebody needs to do in the next 3 months as the last wrap up.
I think, again, be curious, find something that you think might work, test and learn, and go out and try it.
Well, that basically wraps up our time today. We want to thank everybody for participating with us, and definitely thank all the panelists for taking their time out and providing the information. Everybody's definitely looking forward to that. And definitely we have a survey. We'd love your feedback to help us make this. We have more of these coming down the pipeline. This was our first. We appreciate you attending, and take some initiative. Go out there and meet some people and try new things, and it's an exciting time. So stay healthy, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.